When the wound healed and the world began to marvel again, prophecy shifted its focus. The first beast, the one that dominated the medieval world and whose fall was predicted with terrifying accuracy, was never meant to act alone. The prophecy does not end with the rise, the reign, the wound, or the restoration. Scripture reveals something even more astonishing: a second actor, a new power, emerging at the exact moment the first system loses its sword. A power unlike anything that had appeared before. A power that rises without the chaos of conquest, without the smoke of collapsed empires, without the bloodshed of invasion. A power that does not climb out of the sea of nations, tribes, and war, like every beast before it. A power that rises from the earth. The shift is so abrupt, so deliberate, that John's vision almost pauses. Revelation 13 opens with the monstrous sea beast, violent, hybrid, built from the ruins of Daniel's prophecy. It receives authority, it persecutes, it dominates. And then, after its mortal wound, just when the world assumes the narrative is near its end, the prophet says something unexpected. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, another, not the same, not an extension, not a revival. A second power, separate yet connected, distinct yet prophetically intertwined. The entire stage changes. The sea vanishes, the storms quiet, the chaos of nations dissolves, and in its place stands a new landscape, quiet, empty, waiting. A barren world compared to the conflict-torn lands of Europe and Asia. And from that soil, a new force emerges. Not suddenly, like a predator leaping from the shadows, but gradually, growing, developing, expanding, as if raised by unseen hands. John does not see war. He sees ascent. He sees emergence. He sees a rise without resistance. This is the first clue. The earth is the opposite of the sea. In prophetic language, the sea is turmoil, crowds, kingdoms, revolutions, invasions. The earth is sparsity, silence, unoccupied territory, a land where nations do not trample one another for dominance. This new power does not climb out of old civilizations. It does not inherit the throne of Babylon, Persia, Greece, or Rome. It rises somewhere else, somewhere untouched by the legacy of ancient empires. And when it appears, its appearance is strange. If this word is encouraging your faith, hit like and consider subscribing. It truly helps the message go further. Unlike the first beast, which blended the features of a leopard, a bear, and a lion, each detail dripping with centuries of imperial violence, the second beast looks harmless. It has two horns like a lamb. The contrast is shocking. The lamb is gentleness. The lamb is youth. The lamb is innocence. The lamb is freedom. This new power appears gentle, principled, almost idealistic. It is not crowned with iron. It is not armed with claws. It does not carry the scars of tyrants or the bloodstains of empires. Its horns, symbols of authority, are peaceful, uncorrupted, almost pastoral. But John does not end the description there. He adds one line, one devastating line that bends the prophecy into something far more unsettling. But he spoke like a dragon. The transformation is abrupt. The same mouth that promises liberty speaks oppression. The same hands that defend freedom enforce coercion. The same power that rises without conquest later uses power to compel the world toward the purposes of the first beast. The rise is innocent. The voice becomes monstrous. The prophecy is deliberate. To understand the meaning of these symbols, one must return to the very moment the first beast fell. When its civil authority was broken in 1798, the world entered a political vacuum. Europe was fractured. Empires collapsed. Monarchies fell. Old alliances dissolved in fire and revolution. The world needed a new model of power, one unlike the old systems of throne and altar, one capable of influencing the future without repeating the errors of the past. Prophecy says that at that exact moment, a new beast began its rise, not from the sea, from the earth. A young power, growing quietly in a land not dominated by ancient kingdoms, emerging just as the prophetic clock of 1,260 years struck its final hour. While Europe bled, another land expanded. While crowns fell, a constitution rose. While monarchies collapsed, a new nation gathered strength. While the papal throne was seized, a new form of liberty took shape, built on civil freedom, religious freedom, and separation of church and state. The timing is not coincidence. Prophecy does not deal in coincidence. The lamb-like horns reveal more. Horns represent authority. Two horns without crowns point to a system where power does not rest on monarchs, emperors, or inherited thrones. This new beast possesses authority, but not royal authority. Civil and religious freedom stand side by side. A republic, a nation governed by ideals, not by kings. Yet prophecy adds a warning. The same nation that rises in innocence, defending freedom and offering refuge to the oppressed, will one day speak like a dragon. It will one day use influence, law, and power to support the first beast's agenda. It will one day form an alliance so improbable, so contradictory to its own founding principles, that only prophecy could have foreseen it. But the transformation does not happen at once. The prophecy reveals a process. A rise from the earth, peaceful, horns like a lamb, gentle. Then a voice, changing. A voice, not the appearance, betrays the character. This shift is crucial. The beast never loses its lamb-like horns. It keeps the appearance of freedom. It keeps the image of innocence. It keeps the symbols of liberty. But its voice betrays its heart. Its speech reveals its allegiance. Its actions reveal its transformation. And prophecy says, this second beast exercises all the power of the first beast before him. It uses influence. It uses persuasion. Eventually, it uses force. Not for its own glory, but on behalf of the wounded power, whose influence rises once more. The prophecy sharpens. He causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast. This is the turning point. This is the moment when the lamb becomes the dragon. This is when the world sees not the rise of a nation, but the rise of a prophetic collaborator. John watches the second beast lead the world into admiration, not of itself, but of the one whose wound had been healed. This new power becomes the enforcer, the promoter, the architect, the global megaphone of the first beast's restored influence. And it does so while still wearing horns like a lamb, maintaining the appearance of freedom, justice, and moral leadership. This is why the prophecy is cinematic. This is why the shift is terrifying. The lamb-like beast becomes the global voice of the dragon. The guardian of liberty becomes the enforcer of worship. The new world becomes the defender of the old. The land that once offered refuge becomes the instrument of coercion. But prophecy's logic is consistent. It is not arbitrary. It follows a timeline, one that emerges from Daniel and culminates in Revelation. Daniel's visions end with Rome, divided, fragile, mixed with clay and iron, awaiting a final act. Revelation picks up the story and reveals what Daniel did not see, a new actor emerging outside the boundaries of the old world, shaped by freedom yet destined to betray it. The rise of the second beast is not just political, it is prophetic. It is a hinge in the story of the world, because the wounded power, though restored, cannot enforce global worship alone. It needs influence. It needs a partner. It needs a nation that commands the world's admiration. A nation capable of shaping global policy. A nation with economic, military, and cultural dominance. A nation with spiritual influence disguised as moral leadership. And prophecy says such a nation appears at the exact time the first beast falls. It rises quietly. It rises gently. It rises ideally. Then, at the time appointed, it speaks. Its voice is not the voice of its youth. Its voice is not the voice of its founders. Its voice is not the voice of the Lamb. And when it speaks, the world will listen, not because it fears the beast, but because it trusts it. This trust is what makes the transformation so dangerous. A nation believed to be the defender of liberty becomes the promoter of coercion. A nation admired for justice becomes the instrument of prophecy's final crisis. The second beast becomes the most influential power on earth. Not because it conquers, because it persuades, because it leads, because it commands the world's imagination. And prophecy says it will lead the world to admire the first beast again. The scene is set. The players are in position. The moment is approaching. And the power that rose from the earth, gentle, quiet, youthful, is preparing to speak a voice the world has not yet heard. The vision of Revelation 13 did not float in symbolic isolation. It was anchored in time, geography, and history, with the precision that only prophecy could achieve. The first beast fell in 1798. The prophetic wound struck exactly when Daniel's timeline said it must. And as the world reeled from revolutions, collapsing thrones, and the birth pains of a new era, another power, foretold long before a single star fell over the American continent, was quietly rising. Prophecy shifts the camera. The sea fades, the earth appears, the beast from the earth begins to move. But before identifying it historically, the Bible requires something more demanding. The evidence must come from Scripture first. History merely follows. John says, actually die, actually die. John says, actually die. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. Revelation 13:11, the verb coming up on Abinon paints a picture of gradual ascent, like a plant emerging from soil, slow, steady, gentle. Not like the sea beasts of Daniel 7, which arise violently, pulled by winds of war and collision of nations. Daniel's beasts came from chaos. Daniel 7 second, John's second beast comes from calm. Even before history speaks, the contrast is unmistakable. A new kind of power, a different kind of rise. The second beast is the first major power in prophecy to emerge in silence, not in conquest. This alone eliminates most of the nations that ever existed. But prophecy goes farther. John describes its appearance, and it had two horns like a lamb. Revelation 13:11. Two horns, no crowns, no royal lineage, no inherited throne. Just horns, symbols of authority, without any apparatus of kingship. And they are lamb-like. In Revelation, the lamb appears 29 times, and 28 of those refer to Christ himself. The symbol is purity, gentleness, youthfulness, and freedom. A lamb-like power is a nation founded on principles of innocence, conscience, liberation, and safety, a haven, a refuge. And yet, John adds the tension that drives the prophecy. But he spoke like a dragon. The dragon, identified plainly in Revelation 12 as that ancient serpent called the devil and Satan. Prophecy describes a breathtaking paradox, a nation that looks like freedom, but one day speaks with coercion. A nation that rises harmlessly, but one day uses the voice of the dragon. A nation built on liberty, but one day enforces worship. The Bible does not soften the shock, it amplifies it. This new power uses its influence not for itself, but exercises all the authority of the first beast before him. Revelation 13:12.
The dragon voice does not create a new empire. It resurrects the influence of the old one. These are the biblical parameters.
Now, history must answer the prophetic question: who was rising in the late 1700s from a sparsely populated land, without monarchy, without crowns, with lamb-like principles, just as the first beast received its wound? The timeline narrows it with surgical precision. The first beast's domination ends in 1798. The second beast must already be coming up at that time. What nation was rising quietly, globally recognized by the end of the 18th century, yet without kings, without inherited nobility, and founded deliberately on the principles of civil and religious liberty? There is only one, but prophecy does not allow naming it yet. The identity must emerge from features, not labels. A nation rising in a continent untouched by centuries of European empires. A nation born not through overthrowing ancient kingdoms, but through a revolutionary break from monarchy. A nation whose founding documents explicitly separate church and state. A nation whose symbols, lamb-like, youthful, reflect liberty of conscience and human dignity. A nation whose influence within a century would dominate global economics, culture, diplomacy, and ideology. A nation whose power would become so great that it could cause the earth and those who dwell in it, Revelation 13:12, to align with the restored first beast. But prophecy tightens further. The second beast performs great signs, v13. Its influence is not regional, it is global. Its reach is not partial, it is planetary. And yet, John says, the beast does not replace the first one. Instead, he causes the earth to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. This is the core. This is the hinge of the prophecy. This is the plot twist that defines the end-time narrative. The second beast does not take the place of the first beast, restores its influence, globalizes its voice. It becomes the world's most influential superpower, but uses that influence to honor a wounded system whose power returns. And Scripture says this transformation is not abrupt, it is progressive. The horns remain lamb-like. The actions remains noble. The self-image remains pure. The identity remains tied to freedom. But the identity remains tied to freedom. But the voice changes. This is not a contradiction. A nation founded on liberty begins, over time, using power in the most dangerous arena possible, the conscience. Jesus taught, "My kingdom is not of this world." John 18:36, "Render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." Mark 12:17, "Starve the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom." 2 Corinthians 3:17, "Starve the dragon" teaches the opposite, coercion, control, compulsion. The frightening part of Revelation 13 is that liberty and compulsion coexist in the same beast. But how? The prophecy explains, "And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs," Revelation 13:14. And he says, to make an image to the beast, verses 14. And he causes that as many as would not worship should be killed. 15x. The language intensifies. He deceives, he says, he causes, he enforces, he compels. The power that once defended liberty becomes the power that legislates worship. But Scripture says, even this does not happen violently at first. It begins with influence, massive, global influence, a voice that speaks to the world with moral authority. A nation admired for its institutions, freedoms, economic power, military strength, diplomacy, and humanitarian reach. A lamb lifted by the world as an example, because lamb-like horns still shine. What prophecy describes is a geopolitical impossibility unless one nation rises at the exact intersection of timing, geography, and global power. And one did. A republic with no king, a constitution designed to restrain tyranny, a system built to protect religious liberty, a land that became a refuge for the persecuted, a government shaped by freedom of speech, freedom of worship, and separation of powers. A land that, by the mid-20th century, became the most powerful nation in human history. A land whose global influence, military reach, technological dominance, and cultural power shape every continent on Earth. A land whose rise was peaceful, whose symbols are lamb-like, but whose global authority is dragon-like. A land ready, when the prophetic moment arrives, to use its influence in the name of unity, peace, morality, and global good, but ultimately enforcing spiritual allegiance that belongs only to God. This is not speculation. This is not conspiracy. This is Revelation 13. And the Bible never contradicts itself. A nation cannot cause the earth V12 to follow the restored first beast unless it sits at the center of global power. The prophecy demands a superpower, the first prophetic superpower outside the old world. Daniel saw none of this. John saw all of it. The beast from the earth is the first global influencer in Scripture. It rises at the right time, in the right place, with the right features, with the right strength. Only one nation fits every prophetic mark with precision. It does not need to be named here. Prophecy already speaks.
The world's most powerful nation today has the appearance of a lamb and increasingly the voice of a dragon.
And this transformation leads directly into the next episode, the moment when civil power, spiritual influence, global leadership, and prophetic destiny collide, and the world is forced to choose. The moment the second beast steps forward in Revelation 13, the prophetic landscape changes forever. Until this point, the first beast dominated the scene, the wounded power whose influence once shaped kings and kingdoms for more than 1,000 years. But after its fall in 1798, a silence begins, a vacuum opens, a void forms in global authority. History may have seen nothing more than shifting governments and the birth of new nations. But prophecy saw a different story. A new power, lamb-like in appearance, dragon-like in voice, had risen, and its purpose was not merely national, cultural, or ideological. Its purpose was prophetic. Everything about the second beast is functional. Everything about it is directional. Everything about its rise points toward one final mission: to re-establish the influence of the wounded power and prepare the world for the greatest crisis of worship in human history.
Revelation 13:12 describes its first act, and he exercises all the authority of the first beast before him. These words cut deep into the flow of prophecy. The second beast does not replace the first, it resurrects its influence.
It becomes the agent of restoration, not militarily, not by force alone, but through authority, global, political, cultural, and spiritual authority. And the phrase before him enopion means in his presence, on his behalf, in his side. This is not accidental. It is partnership. It is collaboration. It is a prophetic alliance. Daniel saw empires rise and fall with violence and iron. John sees an alliance forged not by battlefield victories, but by global influence and ideological transformation. The second beast becomes the architecture through which the first beast regains its place on the world stage. And prophecy does not hide how this happens. Revelation continues. Babylon causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Revelation 13:12. This is the turning point of the entire chapter. The world does not simply admire the first beast. It does not merely respect it. It does not merely acknowledge its historical importance. It worships. Worship is the core of Revelation. Worship is the battlefield of the end time. Worship is the issue that divides humanity in the final conflict. The second beast becomes the greatest influencer of worship in human history.
Its global presence, its moral authority, its political power, all converge to lead the world back to a religious system whose wound has healed. The prophecy is devastating in its clarity. This new global power does not point the world to Christ.
It points the world to a system that claims the authority of Christ. It does not restore biblical worship. It restores counterfeit worship. It does not elevate God's law. It elevates human tradition exalted as divine. Revelation intensifies the picture, and he performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Revelation 13:13, fire from heaven is not a random symbol. It is covenant imagery. It is divine approval imagery. In the Old Testament, fire from heaven validated God's chosen. Fire fell for Elijah on Mount Carmel, 1 Kings 18. Fire fell on the sanctuary altar, Leviticus 9:24. Fire fell for Solomon at the inauguration of the temple, 2 Chronicles 7:1. The second beast does not merely compel obedience, it simulates divine approval. It creates the illusion of spiritual authenticity. It manufactures supernatural credibility. The prophecy shows a world convinced that the God himself endorses what the second beast promotes. Miracles become validation. Signs become persuasion. Fire becomes deception. Paul warned of this exact moment with all power and signs and lying wonders. 2 Thessalonians 2:9. A global religious phenomenon, supernatural in appearance, demonic in origin, a revival that looks heaven-sent but is hell-inspired. A spiritual movement that captures the world's admiration and its loyalty. Revelation expands, and he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs. Revelation 13:14. The power of deception becomes the second beast's weapon of choice. Not persecution yet, not force yet, persuasion first, miracles first, a false revival first, a counterfeit spiritual awakening.
The world embraces what it believes to be a divine movement, unaware that it is the very mechanism preparing humanity for the final act of rebellion.
Then prophecy moves toward enforcement, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast. Revelation 13:14. An image, not a statue, not an idol, a replica, a restored system, a mirror of the first beast's medieval union of church and state. The second beast leads the world to rebuild what prophecy had previously dismantled, a union of religion and civil authority, a blending of spiritual influence and political enforcement, a system where dissent is not protected but punished. The image is not something the first beast builds. It is something the earth builds under the influence of the second beast. And the prophecy accelerates, and he was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast. Revelation 13:15. The image comes alive. The system once dormant resurrects in full functionality. Tradition becomes law. Spiritual allegiance becomes civic duty. Worship becomes regulated. And then the prophecy reaches its most chilling line, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Revelation 13:15. The transition is now complete. Persuasion to deception, to influence, to legislation, to enforcement, to get to pray. The second beast becomes the greatest enforcer of false worship in world history. Not through local policy, but global pressure. Not through cultural dominance, but prophetic destiny. The lamb-like horns remain visible. The dragon voice now dominates, and the power that once championed liberty becomes the power that crushes it. And all of this, John says, is preparation. Preparation for something specific. Preparation for the mark. The prophecy begins to tighten its grip, and he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark. Revelation 13:16. The second beast initiates the enforcement. The second beast shapes the image. The second beast compels the conscience. But what is the mark? Revelation does not explain it here. It simply prepares the stage. The function of the second beast is to create the conditions in which the mark becomes enforceable. A global religious revival, a cultural shift towards spiritual unity, an international crisis demanding moral leadership, a restored first beast standing as the world's spiritual authority, a second beast using its global power to elevate the first. The final crisis is not political first, it is spiritual. It is about worship, and worship is always about authority. This is why Revelation 14:7 cries out, "Fear God and give glory to Him. Worship Him who made heaven and earth." The final issue is the Creator. The final crisis is worship. The final deception is counterfeit authority. What the second beast enforces, the world accepts. What the first beast promotes, the world admires. What the dragon whispers, the world obeys. The stage is set. The actors are in place. The systems are aligned. The only thing missing is the final decree. But before that decree falls, the world receives one last warning. A message that cuts through deception, exposes the counterfeit, and points humanity back to the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. A message that Revelation calls the three angels' messages. And the next episode brings us to the most controversial, most misunderstood, most feared symbol in all of prophecy. The moment where worship, law, authority, and allegiance collide. The mark. Not a microchip, not a barcode, not a credit system, a spiritual sign of obedience and of rebellion. And the second beast is its enforcer, which brings the narrative to its unavoidable conclusion. The world will soon face a choice between the command of God and the command of man, between the seal of the Creator and the mark of the beast. And the power that once protected freedom becomes the instrument through which the crisis reaches every home, every family, every nation. The lamb-like horns remain, the dragon voice speaks, the earth obeys, the final conflict has begun.